Sources within the government have told us that the Prime Minister's office was not aware that it was Subodh Kant Sahai's brother who was on the board of directors of SKS Ispat, which was recommended to get coal blocks allotted to it. Remember, that recommendation was made by Subodh Kant Sahai himself in a letter that he wrote to the Prime Minister's office. Within 1 day, that letter was forwarded to the coal secretary and 2 coal blocks were allotted to SKS Ispat. Mayur Shekhaja has been keeping track of the developments. Is this a case of the Prime Minister's office keeping itself at an arm's distance from this entire unsavory controversy, Mayur?
There are 2 elements to it. First is that the Prime Minister's office is definitely not going to leave Subodh Kant Sahai in a lurch. Subodh Kant Sahai has the full backing of the party, and the government, including the Prime Minister's office, as far as this crisis is concerned. On the other hand, as far as the involvement of Subodh Kant Sahai's brother is concerned, the message that we are picking up from the Prime Minister's office is that while the Prime Minister's office recommended the award of the coal blocks to that company, they weren't specifically informed about Subodh Kant Sahai's brother's involvement with this particular company. But what sources in PMO are telling us is that that was not a very necessary detail for them to seek, because the ground on which the recommendation was made was that it was meant for the larger benefit of areas around Ranchi. It could have led to a lot of economic activities in the areas around Ranchi, and that was the reason why it was moved at such a speed. As far as the fact that within 1 day the blocks were allocated is concerned, the defense of the Prime Minister's office is that the Prime Minister's office has been very proactive in recommending projects, especially in the Naxal hit areas, considering the employment and the economic potential that the projects have. So these are the various defenses that the Prime Minister's office has. Definitely this one bit of revelation coming in from the Prime Minister's sources in PMO, that they were not aware of Subodh Sahai's linkage with SKS, will come as some kind of a setback for Subodh Kant Sahai. But in a nutshell, the Prime Minister's office, as the entire government machinery, stands as of now is firmly standing with Subodh Kant Sahai.
But is it really? Let's go across to our political editor Javed Ansari. Can the PMO get away that easily by saying that it wasn't aware that Subodh Kant Sahai's brother's company was the one getting those 2 coal blocks? Because isn't every detail of such a recommendation checked by the PMO before forwarding it for implementation, Javed? Is there at least a dereliction of duty at some level?
That's precisely the point, Padmaja, that due diligence ought to have been done. This at best is a very, very weak defense that we didn't know. I mean, just because some name has been forwarded or recommended doesn't mean that the Prime Minister or his office is duty bound to give its permission or give it the go-ahead. Due diligence has to be done, and in this case, if nothing else, the PMO is guilty of not checking, not doing enough due diligence, not checking the background. And it's not enough for Mr. Subodh Kant Sahai to say that yes, indeed I did it and the PMO was not aware. This says very little speaks very poorly for the way this government has been functioning.
But in fact, that doesn't also take away from the fact that Subodh Kant Sahai, because if what the PMO says is to be believed, Javed, there are 2 things here. A, the PMO did not exercise due diligence, and the second, that Subodh Kant Sahai kept the PMO in the dark about the real details of the recommendation that he was making. So both are equally culpable.
Yes, if you read the letter that Mr. Subodh Kant Sahai wrote to the Prime Minister, he just, it's 3 or 4 line letter, if I remember correctly, and it mentions the name of the firm that, it may be looked upon, an appropriate decision may be taken. But perhaps he didn't obviously explain in writing. Maybe he did it in person, and even if he did not do it in person, the Prime Minister's office, what was the tearing hurry that within 24 hours that request was granted? They ought to have waited, done due diligence, and then recommended that.